Let's build a clean and beginner-friendly 2D sword attack system in Unity with proper timing, hit detection, and enemy damage. So far, we have built a solid foundation for our player. We have smooth movement, jumping with coyote time, dash, wall mechanics, animation, and clean camera setup. Now, it's time to move into combat. We will start with sword attack, one of the most common and essential system in any 2D game. And we will build this step by step, so it's very easy to follow. First, we will set up the attack animation, then we will detect what the player hits, and finally, we will apply damage to the enemy. So, let's start with first step, making our player actually swing the sword. Right now, our player has no attack. So even if we press button, nothing happens. So first, we will create an animation so we can actually see the attack. Select your player, open animation window, and click create and name it sword attack. Now, we have an empty animation, but no frames yet. So let's add our sword swing sprites. Select all your attack sprites and drag them into timeline. If we press play now, we can see the animation working. If it feels too fast, reduce the sample rate. Lower value makes the animation slower and easier to read. Now, we have the animation, but it still would not play in game. So next, connect it to the animator. Open the animator window, you will see your new animation state. Now, we need to tell Unity when to play it. Create transition from idle to attack and run to attack. And also back from attack to idle and run. Now, this part is important. By default, Unity waits before playing animations. But for attacks, we want instant response. So, disable has exit time and set transition duration to 0. This makes the attack start immediately. Now create a trigger parameter called sword attack and use it in transition from idle and run to attack. To return correctly, if speed is greater than 0.1, we go to run. And if it's less than 0.1, we go to idle. And that's it. Our animation setup is complete. Now we have the visual part working, but we still need to trigger it from code. Before writing code, let's quickly look at our input setup. I am using Unity's new input system, and inside my input action assets, I already have player action map. Inside that, there is an action called attack, and it's bound to the left mouse button. This means whenever we click the mouse, this attack action will be triggered. If you don't have this setup, you can simply create a new action, set it type to button, and bind it to your mouse or keyboard. That's all we need for now. Now let's connect this input to our player. Instead of putting everything inside player controller, we will create a separate script called player combat system. This keeps our code clean and easier to expand later. Now we set up our input system by creating a controller reference and initializing it in awake. This gives us access to our input action from code. Then inside on enable, we enable the controller, and inside on disable, we disable it. This ensures input only works when the object is active. Next, we create our action function. For now, we will just log a message so we can confirm everything is working. Now we connect our input. We subscribe to attack action, so whenever the button is pressed, Unity calls our function. And on disable function, we unsubscribe here to avoid unwanted input calls. Now let's attach the player combat system script to our player so it can handle all the attack logics. Now let's test it. If you click and see the message in console, that means our input is working correctly. Now we connect this to our animation. We get a reference to animator component and assign it in awake so we can control animation from code. And inside our attack function, we trigger sword attack. A trigger is a type of parameter that tells the animator to play an animation once. Now, when we click, the animation plays correctly, which means our input and animations are now connected. But there is a small problem. Right now, the player can still move while attacking, which doesn't feel very good. So let's fix that. We create a boolean called isAttacking. This tells us if an attack is currently happening. Now, inside our attack function, we set isAttacking to true and trigger the animation. Next, we create function called endAttack and set isAttacking back to false. We call this using an animation event at the end of the attack animation. Now we get a reference to our player combat system inside our player controller script, so we can check if the player is currently attacking and stop movement accordingly. If the player is attacking, we stop movement. Let's test it. Now when we attack, the player stays in place and everything feels much more controlled. Now we have input, animation and control working together, but our attack still doesn't hit anything. So next, we detect what the player is hitting. We do this by checking a small area in front of the player, like an invisible circle where the sword can hit enemies. First, create an empty object at the sword's hit point. This defines where the attack happens. Then, in our script, we add variables for hit point, attack range, enemy layer, and damage. Now, before we continue, there is one important setup step. We need to make sure our enemy are on separate layer, so our attack only detect enemies and not everything in the scene. So, select your enemy object, go to top of the inspector, click on layer and create new layer called enemy. Then, assign this layer to your enemy. Now back in our player combat system, assign this hit point and enemy layer to enemy layer variable. This step is very important. If you skip this, your hit detection would not work correctly. Now, we create a function called perform sword attack. Inside this function, we use OverlapCircle all to detect all enemies inside the attack area. Then we loop through them and apply damage. Now, we connect this to our animation using an animation event at the exact frame where the sword hits. This makes the attack feel accurate and responsive. To make this easier to understand, we use on-draw Gizmos selected to draw the attack area. Now, we can clearly see where the attack will hit. To test everything, I am using a simple enemy with damage function. We will build a proper enemy system in future videos, so don't worry about this for now. And as you can see, when the enemy is inside the range, it gets hits and destroy correctly. So now we have complete attack system, animation, hit detection and damage all working together. But there is one more important thing we need to fix. Watch what happens if I attack and then immediately jump or dash. The animation gets interrupted but our attack state doesn't reset properly. This happens because our system relies on the animation finishing, but actions like jumping or dashing interrupts that animation. So first, we control when the player is allowed to attack. Inside player controller, we create a function called can sword attack. This checks if player is on ground and not in state like dashing or wall jumping. Now, we create a reference to our player controller and initialize it in awake, so we can access movement state from the script. Now, before triggering the attack, we check this condition along with is attacking. This ensures we only attack when it makes sense, but we still need to handle interruption. If the player jumps or dashes during an attack, we need to cancel it manually. So we create a function called force stop attack. This resets our attack state and clear the animation trigger so animator doesn't try to continue the attack. Now, inside our jump logic, right before performing the jump, we call force stop attack. We do this for normal jump, double jump and wall jump. Then we do the same inside our dash logic. When dash starts, we stop the attack. Now, let's test it again. Now everything works correctly. We can only attack when grounded and interruptions are handled properly. And that's it. Now we have a complete and clean 2D sword attack system. We are triggering the attack using input, playing the animation, detecting hits at the correct time and applying damage to enemies, all step by step. Right now, we have focused only the player side of the combat. In the next few videos, we will build a proper enemy system with behavior and reactions and start tuning this into a full combat system. So, if you want to keep building this step by step and turn this into a complete controller, make sure to subscribe. And I will see you in the next one. Happy coding!